Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about the foreign buyer ban here in Vancouver. We're now 2 months into its implementation, and we're starting to notice some significant gaps in the ban that's actually constricting and restricting rental housing supply right across the country. So to give you some background with the foreign buyer ban, implemented at the beginning of January, and with the way that the implementation happened with the foreign buyer ban, us as realtors, we weren't given a lot of upfront information or early information. Throughout December, a lot of us were, trying to pull for information, trying to figure out where the actual details and criteria of this ban was or were. And it didn't get released until I think the last week of December, the last couple weeks. So it was as if this ban from the federal government was kind of rushed into existence for January. And, let's revisit what the purpose of the ban was. Essentially, they were trying to look at restricting foreigners, consumers, from purchasing consumer type real estate. So for example, if you were, so let's say, an average Joe Canadian here, you didn't want to compete buying real estate for that single family detached or that townhome unit. You didn't want to compete with someone who wasn't a resident of Canada, because ultimately you felt that that would push up prices, you'd be kept out of the market, and it wasn't fair in doing so. So this ban essentially was meant to, we'll say, target the retail level or the consumer level of real estate. Now, one of the gaps that has been talked about a lot this last week is how the wording of the law is written and how it's actually restricting land purchases from developers being able to build out rental housing. So the way the law is actually written, it states that if the property is zoned for residential use or mixed use, then that cannot be purchased by a foreign purchaser. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, that's fine, that's great. But we have to keep in mind that residential land is defined in many ways. That can be a single family lot for a single family home, but that could also be acres of land that is zoned for rental and high-rise construction. And so when you group everything into the same basket, when you're trying to target the consumer transaction, you're trying to keep the consumer transaction or supply amongst residents here in Canada, but under that same law, you're actually targeting at the commercial level, because even if a property is zoned for residential uses, it's still considered a commercial property or a commercial type purchase. And as much as we talk about, the foreign buyer percentage here in Vancouver, 7% of condos are owned by foreign owners, if you will. As much as we talk about it on the retail level, when we look at some of these larger development projects, a lot of their funding and a lot of their capital is coming from overseas. It could be coming from Europe, could be coming from China. And in fact, we do, as a country, we do rely on this capital to implement and to be able to develop out large projects. So we do need this capital, and I think the average Canadian consumer is not against the foreign capital coming into the country if it's adding to increased housing supply. So with the way that this wording of the law is, we now have a scenario where there's a bunch of large name developers that do rely on foreign capital, and they're not able to move forward with projects now because the way that the wording is written for this ban essentially is 97% of the funds need to be Canadian funds. And the other thing to note about these developers and development projects is they're often getting finances from multiple sources. They're not going to one source for 300 million or whatever it might cost them, multiple sources. So in that process now, from a financing perspective, all of the I's and all the T's have to be dotted and crossed to make sure that 97% of the combined funding is Canadian. And what it has done is this sort of restriction has put a halt on rental construction, definitely here in Vancouver. The word is at least 500 rental homes are sitting on pause. There's a company, Grosvenor, they've built locally here as well, and they are, I believe, a European-based company, and so they are having some challenges now being able to move forward on projects. To give you an idea in terms of whether this was an oversight or not, as it stands right now, a foreign company or a foreigner can purchase commercial property. They can purchase residential property that's 4 units or more. And I know that because I have a mixed use building myself that has 5 units to it. And so when this ban came into play, I had to determine who my buyer could be. So where the gap is, why can the foreign company or the foreign entity, if you will, purchase something that's existing that has residential units there, but if the land is zoned for residential, they can't. So essentially it's put all of this development on pause. And a lot of these developments, even if they are rental only homes, the buyers are still restricted if they have that, again, over 3% of foreign capital amongst their mix. So it's clearly an oversight. The other thing for us to consider as well is, the need for that capital or these development projects to move forward is greater today than it was even a month ago. If you've been following my channel for a bit and you follow the real estate news, you'll know that there was a large Vancouver-based developer that was filing for insolvency, and the ripple effect of something like that reaches the lender level pretty quickly. And the lenders locally, they tend to pull back or scale back a little bit. They become a little bit more risk averse. And when this happens and then we don't have that foreign capital to fund, again, development projects that are meant to help Canadians, they're meant to add housing supply. When we don't have that source of capital, we're at a stalemate. And especially in a situation where we need construction to be ongoing. We need these projects to be moving forward, and hearing from a lot of developers now that they're kind of stuck. I think ultimately what's going to happen, in my opinion, I think there will be some adjustments to the wording of this law so that these developments can start moving forward or continue moving forward. It's interesting to note as well that Vancouver recently is investing to speed up development permit times at the municipal, at the city level. And so it's kind of interesting to see when you have multiple layers of government and bureaucracy. You have, Vancouver at the municipal level trying to speed things up. And they're getting pushed heavily at the provincial level from David Eby, and with the targets that he's setting on municipalities to get housing approved. But then at the federal level, you have this oversight again with a ban that we feel was rushed into place, that on the residential consumer level actually targets a very small amount of purchases. So it gets rushed into place, and you have two sets of government policies that are really offsetting each other. You're trying to speed up development, but it's getting stopped right at the top level, right where it matters, right when the planning and the land purchases. A lot of times these developers, they are purchasing in assemblies, right? So that has halted that. They're unable to do that if they have too much foreign capital, and by too much I say greater than 3%. So 2 months into the foreign buyer ban, this is what we're seeing as kind of the major gap in it. And again, like I mentioned, I do think that that's going to be adjusted, but at the current time, it's put a lot of projects on jeopardy, or financing funding in jeopardy. And when you don't have the local funding, because the local lenders are nervous to be too exposed to the real estate market or to financing here locally, and then you don't have that foreign capital, again, from various different entities, various different countries, you're stuck in a tough spot. And especially when there's a housing crisis, we don't have enough housing supply. So there you go, guys. That's the state of the foreign buyer ban, what it's actually been doing in the market on the retail level, consumer level, from residential real estate agents. There hasn't been much of an effect at all. And I think for a lot of us, we're feeling the market pick up regardless. There's more buyers now. In many areas, prices are flattening out and actually starting to inch upwards again. I'm not suggesting this is a trend, but I'm suggesting this to mention how the foreign buyer ban has not really had any effect on the retail purchase level, and it's looking like it might have a greater effect on the housing supply level, which is a problem we've been trying to address. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something. If you did, if you could hit the like button, what that does is it sends this video out to more people so they can learn as well. And if you like this real estate content, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you ever want to talk about your real estate situation one-on-one, you can book me in the Calendly link below. I'd be happy to chat with you. But thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.